Good evening. You're very welcome back to Fate Matters. I'm David Hennessy. My guest today is Aisling Keeley from Kilkenny. Aisling has a lovely story to tell us. She's a physiotherapist and an ex-camogie player, and I'm sure she still does hook a ball around a bit too. But here she is, and Aisling, you're very welcome.
Hi, David. Thank you for having me on the show. I just met a lovely colleague of yours on my recent trip to Medjugorje. So just if any of the listeners have never heard of this place, Medjugorje, it is a beautiful place hidden away in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and our Blessed Mother appears there. And this is something which people are like, wow, what is she talking about? And I may have lost many listeners, but this is a place that totally transformed me from a life where there was just pain, suffering, I guess a lot of loneliness, a lot of late nights, and I just found peace like no other. And it was a long road, but
would you take us back to the beginning, Aisling?
I will, yes. So I was just sharing with you before we started the show that yes, I have a Leinster medal in men, under 18 Kilkenny. So I was great for pucking the ball back in the day, and it was something, I suppose, that we often go to sports to try and get affirmation, and this was one avenue that I went down, trying to be the best, and obviously you'd be affirmed momentarily when you score the goal or you scored a point from out midfield, and then the next game you could just play useless and you wouldn't hear anyone saying anything about you, and it was just a hard blow. I found very difficult because my heart was just searching all the time, I guess, to find love, to be affirmed, to be wanted. And I guess I felt that was a big thing in my life the whole way up, even from my childhood, and I wouldn't have said I had a very hard childhood by any means, but I guess we're all wounded in some ways, and no one knows how just a little word from someone in the playground can actually take root. And I remember reading a book before, and the author was just saying how the words of others can actually, pierce like a sword. But the problem is they don't heal like other wounds. And you can put whatever band-aid on it, but the words can still remain. And even sometimes I say to people who come in my groups, the people that usually have hurt them the most are the ones, and they're long dead, and their words are still controlling their thoughts, their minds, their emotions, and their lives. And usually their lies. So I often say in the playground, that's the one place where I just felt the enemy kind of came at me from my primary school. I was, you kind of believe that you're not good for anything, and yet not smart enough, not pretty enough. I guess it's the thing that every girl is hearing nowadays, and especially you're comparing yourself to others, and even now superstars or singers and actresses, especially for young girls, they're just comparing themselves to others, and they're perfect in themselves, but and it leads you down a very difficult road, because you're never accepting yourself for who you are and who God made you to be. And it's just so that was my journey. And I was even told I couldn't sing. I was never picked. I was always kind of left out, and now I actually sing. I'm actually preparing for the third wedding this year. Someone actually a third couple, bride and groom, they're getting married this year alone, and they've asked me to sing at their wedding, which is baffling, considering the fact that I was told I couldn't sing my entire life. You're a crow, I won't say too much, but shut up, keep it down over there.
I was a crow in my time. I remember very well in first class or second or third class, Miss Green in our school saying, the crows over there. So I was sent with the crows. I remember very well. But in my case, it's pretty true.
No, we can all just think whether we're in tune or not. That's the thing. You might need a little bit of practice. But so I guess through the journey, we've all had those little lies that come in the playground, and the thing is, they take root, and most of us, they're still there, and they're growing, and usually other people will come on your path, and they'll feed them a little bit more, and so that was my journey, and I ended up falling away from the Lord. You could say I was probably dragged to mass my whole childhood. My parents, in fairness to them, they always went to mass. I'm not sure if we did any other prayers really outside of it. As a family, we certainly never did the rosary, and if we did, it was like World War. So they knew not to even try to do it, sadly. in our house, but we were always brought to mass. I would definitely say that. I didn't really know why I was going to mass. I just knew I had to, or it wouldn't go down well. So I'd be in trouble. So I went to mass, and then I was 17 when I actually moved away from home, and went off to college. And after that, you're kind of like, well, you're either going for yourself or you're not at all. You're responsible for yourself at this moment. And very quickly, I didn't know why I was going as a child, and so there was no reason for me to go as an adult. And
Where did you go to college?
I started off in Maynooth, doing arts because I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Did you say in Galway?
No, in Maynooth.
In Maynooth. You went to Maynooth. Yeah.
Yes. So I did collection of psychology, French, and sociology. I wasn't sure I was going to come out with that, but I had a great time. I went out. You could find me out. Aisling was sure of a good time, and they'd find me out nearly every night. I'd say I could be out 4 out of 5 nights in the week. And the problem was I actually lived right behind the pubs and the nightclubs. So that didn't go well for me. But I didn't think anything wrong of it. I was just having a good time. People would knock at my door and I would be out ready to go out and party. And the problem is, like anyone, that continued. I eventually moved to Carlow. I did a backdoor course that you can go into to do physio, because again, I felt I wasn't smart enough. So I didn't even do well in my leaving cert, and I ended up doing a backdoor, praise God. And I ended up applying to the UK, and I did physio, and I got a degree in physiotherapy from Brighton in the UK.
What made you go to the UK? Why did you leave for the UK?
Yeah, well, sadly, you actually can't get into Ireland unless you actually have the points in your leaving cert. You actually can't enter into a bachelor's degree in physiotherapy. There's no backdoor, and in the UK they have a backdoor, so they would recognise Carlow IT, and I think Sligo IT also do a very similar course, and they would recognise this physiology and health science course that you can do. It's quite a high standard. You actually do a very high standard of anatomy and physiology, not to bore the listeners, but through that, once I got a distinction, I was able to just walk into the course in the UK. Quite incredible. They actually would fly over to Ireland to try and promote their university, because they saw Carlow IT students, the ones I knew of anyway, but they were very well trained and they would get high results. So it was very good for them to come and try and recruit Carlow IT students and come and enter into their course in the UK. So that's why I went. No other reason. But because I'm quite a home bird, so I had to go. And I spent another 3 years over there, and you could say drinking and slobbering and doing all things. And once again, I finished that course and ended up, I was in Dublin for a little while, and then I ended up going to Galway. I lived in Galway for almost 4 years, where I was out again, partying, and it just didn't end. And now you had more of an ability because you had more money, and I was out. Gosh, we were out the whole time, and it wasn't just myself. I mean, it was an entire department. There was doctors, there was nurses, there was physios. Everyone was out. And the problem is you might know, David, when you're out, and the following day, it's the fear, the stress, the anxiety, and just the overwhelm of all those crushing thoughts that can come upon us, and they're crippling. And the aftermath was never good, and that continued because I was longing to be affirmed. I had lots of friends, and I had to keep those friends, so I had to keep going out. And and I was into sports. I was into tag rugby, so we do Thursday night going out with that. And I was playing camogie up there, even transferred up there and everything. So it was just endless. It was just continuous. And sadly, I thought, I want more. There was this hole in my heart, and I just was desiring more. I felt like there was more in life, and there was still something missing. And I thought that would be, I'll get more money. I'll go to Dubai. It's tax free. My friend lived there, so I'd gone out twice already, and I said, oh gosh, that's it. I'll go out there, and maybe I need to get a master's, and I'll do this, and of course, I got all those things. I went to Dubai. I ended up nearly there almost 4 years again. And I had my villa. I had my sports car. I had a pool right outside. I had everything you could think you could want. I had 5 times the wage I would have in Ireland, tax-free. So my bank balance was full, but my heart was empty.
In Dubai, you were making very good money.
Yes, yeah. But my heart was empty because
Yeah.
it was just a continuous thing. I was trying to put things into my heart that, and that comes from money to men, could be sport, a number of things, everything, but nothing was satisfying this gaping hole that was in my heart. That's all I could say. And I didn't know how to fill it. No one had told me how to fill it, but there was something, I knew there was something more and I didn't know how to find it. And just fast forward just a few years earlier, just before I moved to Dubai, my dad had contacted me saying that there was a ticket going to this place called Medjugorje, and I had 3 weeks off work and I had just finished before I was moving away, and I had gone on my 5th going away party. That's how many friends I had. Okay, we were doing more and I was loving it, okay, because, and they're all telling me, don't go. But I had no reason to go. I did not want to go because I was like, gosh, I'm having a great time here in Galway. But my dad actually convinced me to go. He said, Aisling, it's 40-degree heat. And I was like, whoa, hold on a second. I'm going to Dubai and I'm very pasty. I've been living in the West all these years and it's been miserable, wet, windy. And there's definitely no sign of a tan on my skin here. So for pure vanity, I took that ticket. And I said to myself, I'm going to lose these holy joes. They won't be putting anything in me here. I know who I am. And I'm certainly not going to be into any of this, I would say nonsense. And that's probably what I refer to it as. And that was it. I had made my mind up. So I jumped on that plane. Sadly for me, my mum decided to join that trip maybe 3 days earlier, which really irritated me because I thought, here we go now. She's going to try and convert me to all this, the Catholic faith. And I won't be having any part of it. So I became nearly more irritated. What did I find when I got there? I found myself within a group in Dublin and I couldn't believe, but they were just so genuine. They were so beautiful and so honest. They weren't pressurizing me in any capacity, but I was trying to get away from them. And I guess the only figure I remember in the Bible was Doubting Thomas. Okay. That's actually all I remember was Doubting Thomas, possibly from my communion formation. Perhaps the teacher mentioned Doubting Thomas. And I sometimes refer to him as Honest Thomas because he was the only one who actually said the truth. I don't really believe, But we refer to him as Doubting Thomas. I basically had to look up the Hail Mary. I couldn't remember how to say the Hail Mary. And I did it so that, God forbid, they were going to ask me to pray. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even know the Hail Mary. I'm going to have to look this up. So I did that. I also put rosary beads on my wrist. And I put the rosary beads on my wrist to look the part. And they weren't even blessed. I said, gosh, now they won't come near me now. I'll be looking like the rest of them with the rosary beads on their wrist. It's just like, there's your sign, your tag. Yeah, I'm part of the group, but don't come near me to ask me anything more. So I was great at putting on the exterior, the mask, the exterior. I had usually would have my hair done on Thursday night. Anyways, at different times. I was always affirmed for my exterior, I'd have to dress well. I'd be running. I'd have the makeup on. I'd have the hair done. Have the tan on. So I'd look well. And I even did a bit of modeling back in my time in my teenage years. But I basically had them all fooled, or so I thought, until I got so irritated on my 5th day, and I wanted to get the heck out of there. Now, I was coming down for breakfast, and the travellers were welcoming me down in the morning. The travellers, Aisling, come down, and they'd give me a big hug, and I couldn't stand people coming in so close to me because I had a lot of friends, but no one really possibly knew me. I kept them all at a distance because if they only really found out who I was, if they only knew who I was, they'd also reject me. That was the lie that I believed. I think that's a lie that many people believed about themselves. We can put on this lovely mask, and I'm very good at doing that. I was an expert. And so I got really irritated with my mom on that 5th day. I said, gosh, I've had enough of this. I'm actually getting out of here. I'm booking a new flight and I'm getting the heck out of here. I'm sick of it. And no one, you can't understand, I became so angry. And all I was being met with was love, but I was becoming aware of my brokenness, I was becoming aware of my selfishness because I could see through authentic people who were truly loving. And I realized I was probably a user. You know, I had lots of friends, but I might use them to go out nights out. I didn't know I was doing this, but that's what I was doing. I was looking for love. I was looking for affirmation. And I was probably taking people down with me along the way. And so I ended up getting so angry with my mom, and I got away from her, and I said, gosh, that's it, I'm getting out of here. And I stormed down to the church. I mean, the worst place I could possibly go, but I walked out of the church. There's nowhere else to go. And I left the hotel room, and I went down there, and I was going to give someone a piece of my mind because I was now sick of holding it all in. And I suddenly saw my victim, and he was a poor man, was a priest who was sat by himself, just minding his own business on a bench, possibly praying, I don't know, the rosary or something. And as I approached him, he looked up and he said, I believe I'm being joined by a doubting Thomas. And I couldn't speak. For the first time, someone could see through the mask. But then what followed next, he was like, oh my gosh, you're incredible. And I was like, what? And he goes, you're incredible. You came all the way here. Our Lady loves you. Jesus loves you. God is so proud of you. I was like, oh my gosh, I couldn't. What? This was like foreign. Suddenly this priest with the eyes of Jesus, and he'd been told by Jesus who was coming. He said he looked up from his beads and he was told by the Holy Spirit, here comes doubting Thomas. And I was met with a father's love the moment I went up to that priest. He didn't condemn me like I've been condemned by other people. He didn't roar and shout at me at all the things I'd done wrong like I thought that they would have. No, I was actually met with Jesus through the priest. And he just affirmed me.
Were you talking? Do you start talking with him?
I actually was so shocked. I was so shocked that I said, no. I mean, I'm not that person. I'm not even holy. I'm not even like, I don't even go to mass. I'm nothing. I haven't gone to confession. I don't even know. And then I actually started thinking it was like 20 years, you know, when I last went to confession. I actually think it was my actual, for my, you know, my first confession was also my last confession, you know? And yeah, and he just said, sit down. And he just said, and what he said was, everything that you have done, every single thing that you have done, from the moment of your birth to this very moment, every wrong that you've ever done, I'm absolving you right now from everything, Aisling. I never told him a thing. And he absolved me from every single sin, every wrong that I ever had ever done unto God, every hurt, every pain, every rejection. It was all washed away. And straight away, I can't describe what happened. I honestly felt the sense of something dark just lifting off me. It was like a supernatural experience. He couldn't share it to many people. They would think, what on earth she's talking about? Because this is someone who's coming from a place of science, you know. And I just felt lifting off, this darkness lifting off me, and anger lifting off me. And that anger meant I was very good on the camogie pitch. I was so good on the camogie pitch that the hurlers, I used to be one of the local hurling trainers, he would have me playing with the guys. And sadly, the referee would blow up so many frees because my swing was so wild. But that's the anger that I had. And if you saw me, I'm quite slight. I'm not, you know, but I had an anger in me. So I would be great, put me into a tackle, and I would not let that person away. But that anger left me. And that anger was actually really sadness. And it was manifesting as anger. And the people who saw the anger were only my family. My parents saw my anger. My siblings saw my anger. And that's usually the case for a lot of people. You could be a street angel and a house devil. And the anger that used to come out of me. And I would drive off to Galway. You know, I wouldn't come back for weeks. I wouldn't even answer their calls. I had that anger and I was so irritated. And I became so irritated by my family because they were really growing towards the Lord. My mum went first to Medjugorje. She totally changed. Then my dad went, and I was like, oh my gosh, they've lost the plot altogether. Then my sister went. She was a teacher in Dublin, totally changed. My brother, he was a teacher, totally changed. Healed of anxiety. Nothing else was healing them of anxiety. And the last two to go were myself and my sister, my older sister, and she was also a physio. Maybe we're both more stubborn, I don't know. But I eventually got there, but I only got there because someone gave me a free ticket. I was really tricked into going, you could say. There was no other reason for me to go. I didn't need God. I had everything, or so I thought. But when you're alone, I usually find that when you're alone, usually the night after being out, or when you really get real with yourself, there's a loneliness in a heart. It's a place that was meant for God, his company, his stewardship to guide you in life, and that intimacy with him. And I would say that in that moment when I was there sitting on the bench with that priest and I walked away, I felt the love of God just flooding into my soul for the first time in my life. I'd never felt love like it. I just felt it flooding. I knew I was loved in that moment, just in that moment. The priest didn't tell me another word. But I walked away and I went to my mum and I found my mum. And I apologized for everything that I did to her, the hurtful words. I didn't have to be told, because once the love of Jesus went in there, I knew truth. I knew right from wrong. My conscience convicted immediately. But before that, I couldn't hear my conscience because my soul was just dark. It was just overloaded with sin, overloaded with just being totally away from God. I didn't know the commandments, but I knew immediately that what I did to her was wrong. How I talked to her was wrong. How I conversed with her in that moment in the hotel room was just downright wrong. And all the years, that I was rejecting her, not answering her calls, And I remember just walking up to her and I apologized for everything that I had ever done. And she just said, I never stopped praying for you. And
the power of a mother's prayers.
Amen. And people often refer to Saint Monica. She was praying for Saint Augustine, her wayward son, who even had a child outside, of marriage back in those days, an abomination. And God calls him to be a priest, not only a priest, but a bishop. It's incredible. So in that moment, I came away and I knew that God existed. But I wasn't willing to change anything in my life. I was stubborn. I wasn't willing to change anything. I thought I could just live the way I was. Okay, I believe in God, keep him at a distance, maybe go to mass, now and then, and, fill up that little hole and then keep going out and doing all the things. And I moved to Dubai. And if you don't know anything about Dubai, you'll know this, but I drank more there than I ever did in Ireland. I drank more in Dubai, in a Muslim country, than I ever did in Ireland. And what many don't believe, about Dubai, you can actually get free drink, for women midweek. So you could go into a bar and there would actually be 3 free drinks because I'm a woman. That would encourage me to go out all the more. And so I started to go back down into all that misery and despair once again. But this time it actually was worse than before, because now I was choosing to distance myself from God. I'd fallen away once again. I was living with a partner. I had just completely, this doesn't fit with my lifestyle, and I just stopped going to mass because the moment I entered into the church, I was meeting Jesus there, and the guilt. He wasn't putting guilt onto me. It was stirring up in me because I knew in my heart that I was living a lie. I was denying him and a life with him, and so months passed once again. And what happened was the power of God. God did not give up on me. It says in the Bible, God leaves the 99 in pursuit of that one lost sheep. And And if you're listening and you're that one lost sheep, be prepared. He's not giving up on you. So for me, God went to a patient of mine when I was working in Dubai. I worked in a Muslim practice. He actually owned by one of the sheikhs. And a patient of mine he was one of the managers of Fly Dubai. So it's an airline company, out in Dubai. So he was very high status, but he had 5 tickets for his family members. And he came into me one day and he was not a believer. He was Brazilian, born Catholic, but never practiced. But he saw something change in me when I went to Medjugorje. And he said, Ashley, you know that place that you like to go to? And I've probably been about 4 times at this point, but again, I wasn't changing anything. And I had really stopped practicing once again. And he goes, I'm going to put you down as one of my family members. Can I do that? And I was like, what? You're putting your physio down as one of your family members? And he said, yes. And I was like, why? Because you want me, you're trying to encourage me to go out to Medjugorje, a site of pilgrimage to our Blessed Mother, and you don't even believe. And he goes, I know it sounds crazy, but yeah. and he was trying to justify it because he said, yeah, because you come back a bit nicer. You know, you're a bit nicer to us. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow. So I went, and I was getting 50% off lastminute.com. I would just book and I would go and come back. And would you believe this same patient would book in the day I would come back, and he'd bring me in a coffee and he would go, okay, sit down and tell me all the news. What happened? Incredible. So God was using him, but in turn, he was hearing the testimonies I was bringing back from Medjugorje, how God was touching me, how he was changing my heart of stone, just complete stone. No one else was getting in there. I remember ex-boyfriends used to always say to me, oh gosh, I'm like Rapunzel sitting up in a tower and you couldn't get up to me. I was in relationships, but no one knew me and no one knew my heart because I wasn't letting anyone in for the fear of being rejected until the Lord came knocking on my door. And I had to realize he was the only person that you could really, really trust.
Well, that's it for today. I'll be back with you next week when I'll take up my conversation with Aisling where we left off today. Don't forget you can find this program and all our previous programs on the audio podcast Finding Happiness on YouTube, Spotify, and drbhennessy.com. For now, good night and God bless.